As a trauma survivor, I have always been interested in resilience. But growing up, I believed it was something that you were born with. Then in graduate school, I learned that it was a quality that we all possess and a set of skills we can all strengthen. Most of my resilience has come from writing and seeing myself in new ways by confronting the stories I've always told myself. The more I did that, the stronger I became, and I've dedicated my life to helping others do this work. This podcast is for anyone who wants to understand their story and how to revise it, because when we do that work, we change the world. I first met Katie Rose Guest Pryal at the 2015 Virginia Quarterly Review Conference. Since that first meeting, she has gone on to publish several novels, essays, and books, including Life of the Mind Interrupted, essays on mental health and disability in higher education, the IPPY-Gold-winning Even If You're Broken, Bodies, Boundaries, and Mental Health, and A Light in the Tower, A New Reckoning with Mental Health in Higher Education. She is a bipolar-autistic author, keynote speaker, and a law professor who has spent many years developing her expertise in both neurodiversity and mental health. Her novels and essays, including her Pushcart-nominated The Holes We Live With, have touched me very deeply, and I feel so honored to call her friend. To learn more about Katie and her accomplishments, please see the show notes. During this conversation, Katie and I took a deep dive into neurodiversity and how it impacts writers. As you prepare for this conversation, I have a few questions for you. What do you know about neurodiversity? Do you consider yourself to be neurodivergent? If you are, how does that impact the way you set up your writing life, what you write about, and how you see the world? I hope you'll ponder these questions as you listen along. Now let's get to my conversation with Katie Rose Guest Pryal. Are you a writer who struggles with doubts? Do you wonder if your stories are good enough? Do you wish you had some simple tricks that would make the writing life just a little bit easier? Become part of my Writing and Resilience community by signing up for my newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Write More, Fret Less, 5 brain hacks that will supercharge your productivity, creativity, and confidence. The link is in the show notes. Katie Rose Guest Pryal, welcome to the Writing and Resilience podcast. I am so happy to have you on the show today.
I'm so happy to be here. I have been waiting my turn to be on your podcast, Lisa. This is so up my alley. And of course, I love you so much.
The feeling is mutual. And, we've known each other for a long time and we've had lots and lots of conversations about this. But I think this term neurodiversity is talked about a lot and people just don't know what it is. So before we get to that, I'm going to give you a chance to tell us anything you'd like to know about you. But then I want you to answer the question, what is neurodiversity?
Okay, sure. Well, right at the beginning, I am a neurodivergent author and speaker. I have bipolar disorder and I'm autistic. And like many women who are autistic, I was diagnosed later in life, not as a child. To get a diagnosis of autism in the 1980s, if you were a girl, it was probably easier to walk on the moon. So I was diagnosed actually in my 40s. That's a new diagnosis for me, but it was not a surprise. Let's put it that way. My main focus with my work is making the world more inclusive for neurodivergent people and improving our collective mental health.
And you do such a good job of that. I see it out in the world everywhere, and I'm so grateful for what you do. Now, I have a question for you, because First, what is neurodiversity?
Oh, sure. So the definition that is generally acceptable, say dictionaries, things like that, is this. It's the range of human differences in brain function and behavior that are part of the normal variation of the human population. And the important part of that phrase is normal variation. So there's 2 words, normal variation, right? And so the way I explain this is that there are lots of normal variations in the human population. How tall am I, Lisa? Really tall, right? So 6 feet tall over here. I am maybe at the end of one bell curve of height, let's say. But I am still on the bell curve of human height for women. So I'm a normal variant. But the difference between, say, normal variants like height or other things like that, right? Some normal variants, this word normal, right? I keep saying it. Some normal variants are just a thing, right? Hair color, eye color, whatever, and it's fine. But some of those normal variants are penalized, okay?
Mhm.
And I'm sure without much effort, you can think of normal variants in the human population that are penalized. If you're different in this particular way, if your variant is this particular variant, then you're going to be penalized for that. And so being neurodivergent, that particular variant is another one that is also penalized. So that is the thing. That's what it means to be neurodivergent. So neurodiversity, it's a range of human brain function that is part of the normal variation, the human population. But the deal is, although normal is socially constructed, doesn't matter if it makes your life harder because it is a variation that is penalized by our society.
Yeah, we have such a narrow view of what normal is. And it's so narrow that I often have a huge problem with this term. And I like this idea of neurodiversity because it honors the range of experiences that people can have. And
Mhm.
so neurodiversity is often talked about in relation to autism spectrum disorder or ADHD.
Yes.
What about trauma? Do you consider trauma part of neurodiversity?
Absolutely. The term was coined in 1998 by an Australian sociologist by the name of Judy Singer. She was autistic and she coined it in the context of autism spectrum disorder. It was a portmanteau of neurological diversity. And she just put them together, neurodiversity. Isn't that great? I love
Mm-hmm.
that.
I love it
And
too.
I know. And so for a long time, it was only used in the context of autism. But as time has gone on, the term has grown more generous and inclusive, and that's wonderful. And so the way I explain it to people who are new to neurodiversity and say the neurodiversity movement, which helps create more inclusion for neurodivergent people in our society, is I break it into three types. Now, I will say with a huge caveat, A, if you're a psychologist listening to this, I'm sorry. And B, if you are someone who is more familiar with neurodivergent people and neurodiversity, then you're going to know what I'm saying. These are very blurry lines in the end.
Mhm.
And in my new book that's coming out in the spring, A Light in the Tower, which is about mental health and higher education, I actually lay these out and then I show how blurry they are. But the point is that there are three ways to think about to say divide or categorize. And the first one is this developmental disorders. Okay. And that's autism and ADHD and dyslexia, things like that. And then the second thing is psychiatric disabilities, or what we sometimes call mental illnesses as well. Those terms are theoretically interchangeable. Once again, I'm like, okay, okay. So mental illness, right? A mental illness. So bipolar disorder. My bipolar disorder is in the second type. Anxiety disorders, depression. That's the second type. And then the third type is acquired mental disabilities. And right in the middle of that is trauma disorders like post-traumatic stress disorder, complex PTSD, concussions. So if you have post-concussion syndrome, if you have brain fog from even COVID or
Yeah.
from cancer treatment, if you had a stroke, anything that is an acquired mental disability, now that's column three. Absolutely. Right in the middle, PTSD and other trauma related disorders. Absolutely. And in my novel that I just finished, the main character, actually at the very beginning, I say the main character is neurodivergent. She has complex PTSD from long-term psychological abuse by her parents. And then throughout the book, she self-acknowledges this. It's on the page and talks about it. And it affects her ability to form relationships, to make good decisions, in all these types of ways, which you are very familiar with, probably
Mhm.
more of an expert about it than I am. I have my own lived experience, but this is something you study. And so if you sit down and look at how all of these things affect our ability to make decisions, to concentrate, to plan, all of the things that say fall under what we might call executive functioning.
Mhm.
Okay. Can you concentrate in class as a teacher, right? As a professor?
Right.
The student who grew up in a traumatic household, and the student who has anxiety disorder, and the student who has ADHD, all of them have trouble planning a complex project. They might, right? But they could all have that same executive function challenge because of their neurodivergences, because they affect your executive function. And so that's what matters to me. It doesn't matter what column they're in or whatever. What matters to me is your executive function compromised? Are you able to meet deadlines? Is procrastination something that you really struggle with because you have anxiety and perfectionism? Okay. And the answer is it doesn't matter what column you're in, because yes, all of those things.
Yeah, and so I'm going to summarize this in a very simple way. And feel free to say that is not exactly correct. What I love is that you gave us three different ways to think about it, right? So there's something you were born with, right? Something that
Yes.
happens developmentally in the brain before you were born, either in utero or as you're born. Then there are things that happen afterwards, these acquired ways. And psychiatric forms of neurodiversity kind of, as I understand it, fit somewhere in the middle, because there is what you were born with. And so the potentials for mental health challenges, maybe based on genes or other things that happen in the body. And then there's what happens outside. So we often talk about that in clinical work as the stress diathesis model. Like the
Okay.
potential is there, and then some kind of stress happens out in the world, and that unlocks the genetic code that helps things manifest. And then there are things that are largely external, and complex PTSD is one of those things because it is related to chronic complex abuse that happens. And I'm a
Right.
person who has complex PTSD. You know, you and I have been talking about this for a long time, and I've been thinking deeply about this and about my own healing and the work that I have done. And thinking of myself as neurodivergent has actually been really helpful because it creates gentleness inside me. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things I've had to learn how to do is acknowledge the fact that my brain works differently and that that is okay.
Yeah.
And when I am able to acknowledge that, I am able to give my brain and my body what it needs, and then I function at a much higher level.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, like, why do we need this word? Why can't we just say, oh, I'm autistic or I have ADHD? And the reason that we need the word neurodivergent or diversity is because it creates this feeling of acceptance. One, you're not alone.
Yes.
Okay. So you're in this group, right? And when you're in a group, you aren't alone. It depathologizes you,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not a walking diagnosis. You're a person who's part of a group with other people who share your challenges. And and then this, of course, is a group that does push for greater acceptance outwardly, which then, of course, encourages you to have greater acceptance of yourself. And that is exactly the point of this idea of neurodiversity, of the conception of neurodiversity as opposed of this social acceptance. And I am actually not anti-medical. Now, the medical model is something else, and we probably can't go down that road today.
If we
But
went down that road, we would be here all
all day.
day.
But I'm a huge fan of modern medicine when it comes to taking care of me.
Mhm.
Okay. They've done like I have great healthcare providers, and I am not anti-psychiatry, which is I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that being part of something larger than myself has helped me appreciate myself. And I think that's similar to what you are saying.
Absolutely. It helps me appreciate myself. It helps me take care of myself in a better way. It does help me feel less alone. And also, you know, we're thinking about normal as something that exists on a spectrum and that I am within that. It's just my version of what we'll call normal. And again, that word is problematic in so many ways, is just on, you know, closer to one end of a pole, right?
Mhm,
In terms of how my nervous system works. And
mhm.
one of the things that can affect me, and it was affecting you as well recently because you created a post for it on Instagram, is this concept of overwhelm. And
Yeah.
so for, you know, this is being recorded in November, and my father just had heart surgery, and I spent 2 weeks in Rochester, New York. I live in Virginia, so
Mhm.
I was very far from my home, and I spent 2 weeks going from a hospital to a hotel and back again, trying to advocate for my father, be there for him, support him, also work with my clients and keep my business going because I did need to do some of that. It wasn't he wasn't so sick and it wasn't so dire where you stop everything.
Yeah.
But I pulled back on a lot of things. And then I had myself and my own fears and wonderings about like, what is this going to mean? Because I am my father's healthcare proxy and I
Right.
have, some care responsibilities related to him. So when you posted that, I was like, yes, I get it. So tell us a little bit about why you created that post and what you want us to know about it. So for
Okay.
those of you, while she's looking at it, it has a bunch of things that you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed, and also this amazing video of Katie riding her horse. Is this the silly pony?
Yeah, this is a pony. It's not my horse. Remember, I'm 6 feet tall, right? And so this is a pony that is not the right size for me. But I was riding it recently and jumping it over jumps, and she's a good girl. And it's always very funny to ride a little tiny pony when you're tall. I mean, it doesn't hurt the horse, of course. You just, it just looks silly. And it's a lot of fun because it's like I didn't get to ride ponies because I was like 5'9" when I was 11. And so I never had that experience of being a little girl on a pony. It wasn't a thing. And I want to acknowledge before we go any further that horseback riding is a activity for people who are highly privileged. And I know that.
Mm.
And so I do share my experiences with horses, with the world. And it is not something that everyone gets to do, and I'm lucky, and I know that, and I just want to say that right now. Fortunately, there are a lot of organizations that are bringing horses to all sorts of people now, and of course, where I live in North Carolina, there's a lot more horses in a lot more places than you might think, actually. In other parts of the country, that is not the case. I would recommend checking out the Compton Cowboys on Instagram. They are an amazing organization. It's just as it sounds, the Compton Cowboys. They are incredible. And they have a lot of sister organizations too. So, sidebar.
Do they do things with equine therapy?
No, they are an actual horse team and located in Los Angeles. They're incredible. And so, Compton Cowboys, check it out.
I will add that to the list of show notes.
Okay. Anyway, so the point is that um overwhelmed. I've been feeling wildly overwhelmed myself. I actually outsourced some work to my 14-year-old son who came through in a very big way. I realized that I need to make use of him more. I paid him his rate. What's the 14-year-old going rate for a 14-year-old boy these days? That's what I paid him in Robux. Of course, asking for help is like the hardest thing in the world, even from your child. But the thing about being overwhelmed is that it's really bad for you because it's part of like stress is not, it's like bad for our bodies. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, that means you have been in stress for a while. It's
Mm-hmm.
like long term. And that's chronic stress. And that is really bad for you. So, I mean, I made a list here, but like headaches, it can cause weight gain and weight loss that are unhealthy, high blood pressure, and then you become more susceptible. Your immune system drops. It can cause early, like premature birth, which is something I'd actually dealt with. And the doctors attributed it possibly to chronic stress, which made me feel really guilty at the time. So it's like there's all these horrible, we know this, but even worse, I guess, is that neurodivergent people are even more susceptible to chronic stress because our world is not made for us at all. Okay. And so if you have any sensitivity to loud noises, surprising sounds, say backfiring cars, everything's chaotic, which say somebody with PTSD might feel,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody who is autistic, like say shopping malls around the holidays when we have to go do stuff, right? I don't even want to leave my house. So, because like I said, we're operating in a world that was not designed for people who have any kind of sensitivity to anything. Okay. It's just chaos, fire hose. Okay. And that is, like, can we not live in a chaos fire hose? There's other ways to live. Okay. But apparently, that is not, they think we want the chaos fire hose, but they're wrong. In fact, it's not good for anyone. But other people seem to be able to, tune it out better. I would argue like nobody needs this. But some of us are, say, the canaries in the coal mine, right?
Yes.
All the coal miners are getting sick. The canaries are really getting sick. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're the canaries, right? And so what we get high sensory input, and we are expected to hide that we're feeling bad then on top of that, which makes it even worse. I'm fine. I'm not fine. So not fine, but I'm fine. And then I got to like make good decisions while I'm really not fine. And then everything is really bad. So I was like, I need a day. Oh, wait, I need 2 days. Maybe let's make that 3 days to do absolutely nothing. And I actually did this weekend. I watched a show I'd never seen. I watched the morning show.
I love it.
I've never seen it before. And so I turned it on, episode 1. I'm already halfway through season 2. And so I was like, I just want to watch this show and be in my room. I want to do some stretches because my back was hurting. And like, I never dealt with that. Like over the last 2 weeks, I've been just ignoring the pain and taking a lot of Advil, not good. And I wanted to just not owe anybody anything.
Yes.
And I said, you know what this is? This is selfish. This is really selfish, Katie. And I said, sure is. And I got to that place where I was like, you know what I don't feel? I'm refusing to feel guilty. And it was so dang hard. And, I owe all these people things, whatever, my attention, deadline, or the phone would ring. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to talk to them right now. People I love, and I was like, and I didn't put on clothes. I mean, I bathed and I'd put my nightgown back on, my pajamas. And I just did that for like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I'm like, oh, I wasted all this time with my own guilt. I should be working on my this or that, whatever is 100,000. Name it, Lisa. What should I be working on, right? And I didn't do any of those things. So I was being selfish for myself. I shut everything down. And so when Monday came around, it was like a horse let out of the gates. I felt so good. But this word selfish, I was like, I want to rethink this word selfish. I'm like, what does this mean? Concerning yourself with your own health and happiness.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that. Like, yes, be selfish.
Hell
And
yeah.
and like shut down that guilt, like shut it down. And it is hard because it gets in there. And before you know it, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't watch the next episode. Yes, you should. And then you should take a bath and read on your Kindle, whatever you want. Not for work, not a workbook, fun book. It was amazing. And so then Monday morning, I was like, I got to share this epiphany, which is, I'm sure everybody's had, but I had it.
I think that's the most important part is when we have that. I mean, you can be told, be selfish, focus on yourself, focus on self-care, blah, 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 all the ways that we talk about it.
We can never hear it enough.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
And until you actually do it for yourself, it doesn't matter. And it's interesting that you had that because around the same time you were having that epiphany, I was teaching a class for a bunch of incredible memoirists who were very understanding and very flexible because I had to change some things around and do things differently because of what was going on. And one of the people in the class said, "Don't worry, Lisa, your dad comes first." And for the first time in my life, I did something different because I would have just said, yes, of course, family comes first. That's the most important thing. I took a deep breath and I said, no, I come first. And my dad is really important, but he comes next because if I don't put on my oxygen mask, that metaphor we hear all the time, if I don't take care of myself, then I'm going to end up falling over. And then who's going to be there to help my dad? I have to come first. And some of the ways that I've been helping myself come first over this period are one, doing this grounding exercise every single day. In fact, I do it multiple times a day. I just stand there and I wiggle my toes. I take a deep breath and I wiggle my toes to remind myself that I'm here and now and everything is fine. And when you have trauma, and you're a trauma survivor, and if you have complex PTSD, your amygdala is constantly firing on high alert. Everything feels dangerous. And when you get into a situation that is a crisis, number one, it's going to feel normal. It's going to feel like life is finally good. You've got this because the intensity of the moment matches the intensity of what's happening in your brain. That's why trauma survivors are fabulous in a crisis.
Put me in a crisis.
Freaking good.
Nailed it. Yeah.
And then give me a regular life and then it's a little bit more challenging. So I've been trying to remind myself and remind my amygdala, I am here in this present moment and I'm breathing over and over again. The other thing that I've let myself do is cry. Because I learned this recently. This is so important. especially if you have been overwhelmed. One of the things that happens when you are overwhelmed is your cortisol levels are through the roof. They are so high. And that's one of the reasons why it's so bad for your immune system and for all these other parts of your body.
Yes.
When you cry, you actually release that cortisol. You are
Mm.
letting the cortisol go and also allowing, these feelings to go through your body. And that was a huge
So
revelation for me.
let me tell you something. I have this wonderful therapist. She's great. And we've been working through a lot of my trauma from the past. And she's the first person I have felt like I could talk to about this. And the reason why is because she worked for Child Protective Services for like decades. And so when she tells me, no, Katie, that really was bad, I believe her.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else would say it to me and I would like blow it off because I'm like you don't know like or I'd say oh yeah you say it's bad because you want to okay but she says like no that was and she's like and I have to listen to her. I have to believe her because she knows what she's talking about and she's very like kind and caring and tough at the same time. She's perfect for me. I adore her, and if you're listening T, I adore you. Okay. And so, and this is why it's like she has so much credibility in my eyes.
Yes.
And so one of the things, like I'll be recounting a story from when I was younger and like, I'll sort of laugh about it. Like not sort of actually I'll say, and then ha ha ha, this happened, ha ha ha. It's like some horrible story. And I laugh because that's my sort of, right. I've always laughed when I've told these stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says, so you should cry now. And she says that to me. And I'm like, what? And she goes, you should cry now. You should cry about that. That's really sad. And like that, I start crying. It's like she's got a wand. And then I do. I just sob. And she's like, here's the tissues. And then I just sob, like the gnarliest sobs. And 100% of the time, just it's like I meditated for an hour. All that whatever just drained. It was like you open a faucet and it just fell out. And so now I say to myself, you should cry now when something
Yeah.
happens. I say the words in my head, you should cry now. It's been like years, 2 years or whatever. I don't even think it's that long, but it's time. Time is important and it has no meaning at the same time. Okay, but yeah, you should cry now, Lisa. You should cry. You should cry now. I
Yeah.
mean, it's in my head.
I love that your therapist does that. I mean, one, you have an amazing therapist. I can
I
just tell
do.
right now. And it's so good when we have therapists like that because I remember the first time a therapist called me out on two things. Number
Yeah.
one, I was telling like some wild, violent, horrible story, laughing because I can tell you the hysterical version and
What's
I will
that?
laugh hysterically. But then people who aren't trauma survivors are like, whoa. But people who are
That's
trauma survivors will laugh along because they
right. Laugh with
understand.
us.
Yes,
I
yes,
know.
they get it.
We
And I've seen that with books like, Mary Carr's The Liars Club. There were some bananas traumatic things that were happening and I was laughing along because I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've been there." But then I
yeah,
had a therapist who said, "Yeah, that's not really funny."
that's
And when
right. She
it
says that to me.
yeah,
She's like, that's not funny. That's terrible.
and it hit me and I finally felt seen. And it was
Yeah.
so huge and that's when the tears came and they needed to come because when we are laughing about things that truly are not that are terrible, they're not
Yeah.
funny, we're trying to close our hearts down.
Yeah.
We're trying to protect ourselves, but healing is about getting past that armor, right? In a safe way with safe people. And it sounds like you have a safe person and I have a safe person now, but this is a different therapist. But she said that and then the fine word, right? She looked at me and
I know.
she was asking me like, are you, how are you doing today? I was like, fine. And she said, do you know what Aerosmith says about that? Fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And I was like, damn.
Damn.
I know, because I was like, that is so true. That is exactly when I say fine, 95% of the time I am one or all of those things. And so I've
Yeah.
stopped saying that. Or when I do say that, I go pause, like internally, like pause. What does that mean? And that's
Hmm.
been really helpful because trauma survivors and I think anyone who is neurodivergent, we develop all of these skills and strategies for handling the world that looks like what everyone else calls normal. And one of the hardest things is that most people who would be considered to be on that narrow band of normal have
Very narrow.
no freaking clue how hard the rest of us work to fit in the band. And I can tell you, I have worked on this stuff for years. I have lots of skills. I work hard every single day to be in the band.
Yeah. If we could widen that band, like just
Yes.
let's just start like this, like I'm holding my hands up for those who aren't able to see me if you're listening on audio or whatever. I'm holding my hands up like 2 inches, okay, to make a channel. If we widen it like 1 more inch, right? How many people's lives would be changed? How about another inch? Okay. And what I mean when I say that is, okay, let's say I ask Lisa here, how are you doing today? And she gives that response that people make fun of. Oh, well, my dad's in the hospital and I had to move to Rochester for 2 weeks and I was really worried about my work because I was giving this web. And then, we're at work and then, oh my God, I asked Lisa how she was doing. And instead of just saying fine, she gave me this like litany of things. And then people gossip because you broke the social code.
Yes.
Okay, the contract that when I ask you how you're doing, you say fine. You ask me how I'm doing, I say fine, and we just lie to each other all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And okay, well, so you stepped outside that narrow band, Lisa, and you didn't lie. Okay, well, we tell children don't lie except all the time when you're supposed to lie, right?
Right.
So what if we widened the band a little bit and made space for us to answer that question for those people who would like to answer that question honestly, occasionally, and didn't mock them behind their backs. For people who maybe dressed a little quirky and we didn't make fun of them, think about how much we as adults mock people who do not or are unable to squeeze themselves inside that narrow band, right?
Yes.
How
Yes.
about the days when I there are plenty of days where I just don't have the strength of like whatever. Should I say strength of will? I mean, I'd like how about just the juice to squeeze myself inside that band, right? I mean, this is called
Yeah.
masking. Okay. Autistic masking is a very particular thing, but let's use that word to talk about, to mask your neurodivergence and fit yourself in that narrow band. But man,
Mm-hmm.
after like 3 hours of that, I need a nap. Okay. And it also adds to your stress level and it raises that cortisol because you're like, and you don't even realize you're doing it. You're like fitting in into that narrow band. And so, and that's not putting yourself first because the whole point of doing it isn't to like make your life easier. It's to make their lives easier. It's to
Right.
make other people not make sure that other people don't feel uncomfortable. Not about you. I mean, it is in the end, of course, it is about you because if you make them uncomfortable, then they'll react. There'll be a backlash, right? But God forbid we make people who are neurotypical or whatever feel uncomfortable because we actually tell them that our dad's sick. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, why can't we talk about that though? Why can't we ask for help and sympathy and whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, exactly. It's this very narrow band. We work so hard. And then that work itself is exhausting and overwhelming. And we haven't even done the actual thing that we need to do that day.
Right. And so one of the things we talk about in this podcast is writing. And so if
Yes.
you're just trying to go out on the world and do the normal things that you have to do, like the typical things that are part of your day, and writing happens to be one of them, or you're a new writer and you're like, I'm adding writing into my day. For you, how does your neurodivergence impact your writing? What are the gifts that you bring to the table as a writer? And also, what are the challenges?
So I have bipolar disorder and autism, which means that the first of all is the two of them it's not unusual that they go together. Okay. And so with bipolar disorder, that means that sometimes I am depressed. And when I am depressed, absolutely nothing gets done. And fortunately, that is rare. I have excellent medical care. And then if at the other end, there's mania, which is also unusual for me. And people sometimes think, oh, when you're manic, you get all this stuff done. That's actually not true. When you're manic, you can't do anything. You literally, your brain it's cooking, but it's not cooking good things. So if you read accounts of people who have experienced mania, they write things down that are like nonsense. But I do feel like that my energy does actually come in like waves. Okay. But the thing is, though, is that that's not how work works. Now, I do not believe in the right everyday thing because I
Mm-hmm.
sometimes think you need to be selfish and binge watch the morning show. I think that's the
Yes.
thing. And so, but like we need breaks. But I do think that just like anything, we can tell ourselves, our minds, our bodies, okay, look, you're a writer and you just do your job, okay? Self, brain, body, we're all one, right? And so I sit down and I do my job. And some days it's terrible and sometimes it's better. And that's my job. And as far as being autistic, it's actually kind of neat, is that I don't really need other people. And maybe this is why I'm a writer. I have very few friends. You're one of my few friends, Lisa. And being in large groups is very unsettling for me. Being around is exhausting. And so like I can work for long, 8 hours at a time without ever seeing another person, and that's fine. I do enjoy working at like a coffee shop. Incidental human contact is okay. I like the sort of distraction of others, although I will wear headphones, but like just sort of the energy. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, I will use that energy. I also look at people, I'm like, oh, that person's interesting. Let me make some notes. You might be in a book. But I do have this really incredible ability to focus. That the hyper focusing thing is something that I do have, and that's great. Problem with hyper focusing is that my children come banging on my office door and they're like, Mom, we should have left for something an hour ago. And I'm like, oops. So fortunately, I've gotten very good at not caring about that. I don't freak out about schedules and things like that. It's fine. And then I just sort of honestly accidentally started, and all of my books just ended up writing about mental health struggles and neurodiversity. Every single one of my books. And I didn't even know I was doing it at first. Literally didn't know. I just did it because that's how I see the world. So it gives me a really wonderful, it's the lens through which I see everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess as you get older, you realize that the gift that you have to give the world is you.
Yes. I love how
That's
you said that. Yeah. And I think depending on how you're neurodivergent, it will determine how you engage with your writing life, which challenges you have, which things you excel at. I know for me personally, I feel really deeply and I can write scenes where I can translate that really well. At the same time, because I feel really deeply, that can be exhausting. And
mm-hmm.
if I tap into a trauma vein, and I talk to a lot of writers about this, then of course, if I'm not careful, I can re traumatize myself. And then that can be a whole
Yes.
wormhole that I can go down. So I think,
Oh, yes.
yeah, there's lots of different ways that it can affect us. And I'm going to have you on another time where we can talk about specifically about feelings and
Mhm.
writing, because I was teaching this webinar recently, and that was a great question. I have this whole blog series I'm going to talk about in
Mhm.
terms of how do you capture feelings when you don't feel feelings. And it's not that you don't feel feelings, it's that you don't have good access to them or good language around them or a good understanding of what's happening. It's not that you don't feel, but especially when people are experiencing highly traumatic events, it's common to dissociate. It's
Yeah.
common to shut your heart down in the moment, because if you were to feel the feelings that would be appropriate for the situation, you may not be able to do what's needed to survive the situation.
Mhm.
And so that creates a lot of issues in memoir, because people are like, people keep asking me what I was feeling, and the answer is nothing. And yet you're
Yeah.
telling me this does not make a good story, especially when I say that again and again. So I want to talk with you about that at a later
Yeah.
time.
Well,
Just
I
want
had
to,
a piece rejected once from a magazine. They requested it and I wrote it. Like I thought I opened a vein on the page, and the editor sent it back. I'll never forget it. Unnamed editor who is famous and you would know the name, magazine that is well known and you would know the name, and sent it back and said, there's just not enough of you here. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I had to go to bed for a week after writing this.
yeah.
And it was that very thing you're saying there. And I'm like, there aren't any guts left to spill.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think there's a lot there about, especially for women, wanting us to like just ourselves all over there's a lot there too about maybe exploiting, especially in like online magazine writing. We can talk.
Yes.
They convert our O negative into clicks, and and there's a problem with that as well. But I was like, there isn't anything more. This is what it was. This is what you asked for. This is what it is. And she's like, well, I just don't get a sense that. I'm like, then you don't understand. And that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens to people all the time. And then what happens is that writers feel shame. Writers
That's
feel bad, and they feel like I failed,
yep.
when it's much more complicated. Number one, you didn't fail. Okay. So I want to say that you didn't fail. I don't fail when I can't do it. No writer is failing. It's just that it's more complicated
Yeah.
And we need to acknowledge that and figure out those ways around it, which I'm constantly working on. So I want to talk with you about that at another
Yeah.
time. But I do know you have a lot going on today. And I'm so grateful that you're here. So I have three questions I'm going to ask
Yes.
you in rapid
Yes.
fire.
Sure.
Number one, what is the best piece of writing advice that you have ever received?
Ooh. Ooh. Mary Oliver, my very first workshop writer.
You
Professor.
worked with Mary Oliver. Oh
Sure
my
did.
gosh.
I usually like when I tell people that, I pull out the poem she wrote about me. I can another time.
Oh
I
my
have a poem.
gosh.
It's tucked in the back of White Pine, and it's called Katie at the Gallop. Not kidding, because I was on the equestrian team in college, and I missed a workshop to go to a horse show at like Holland or something. I know it's the whole thing is too preposterous for words. Okay, yes, I missed my workshop with Mary Oliver to go to a horse show at Holland. Okay, so anyway, and she wrote a quatrain about me called Katie at the Gallop. This is a real story. Anyway, and so she's the one who said the muse does not show up for you. Okay, that is not how that works. You don't walk around like waiting for the muse. Okay, she's so practical. Like you think of this person writing about all this stuff about nature. She's like, no, 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 no. You go and you sit at your desk and then you write.
Yes.
Okay, that's what you do. Okay, there's no waiting for like this whole like this romantic idea of like, oh, I can't write today, I don't have the muse. She just thought that was such horseshit. It was great. I was like, okay, writing is work.
Hmm.
It's great work, but you go to your desk. And I learned that how to be a writer from her. So that was the best piece of advice. And I was like 19 and it stuck. So I'm so lucky.
And that is why you've been so prolific. Now
Thank
I
you.
understand it all because Katie can write so fast and she writes so many things. And I'm always like, holy moly, how does she do all of that? Now I know it's because
You
you worked
sit
with
down.
Mary Oliver.
That's
And at
right.
19, you heard that advice, which is amazing.
It is.
So that's about your writing. Now I want to
Yeah.
talk about your life. How do you tap into your resilience? What is the best strategy you've learned?
I don't do a good job, actually. I feel like I don't. The best thing I've done lately is find this really good therapist. She has been a huge help because sometimes I feel like I have a really good partner who I feel like takes care of me. And sometimes I feel guilty about that because I feel like I'm a lemon and like he didn't read the fine print and ended up with me. And so I don't feel like I am resilient actually. But I think I must be because I'm still here. So I guess I think the most important thing I've done really is find this person. I can't believe, I really cannot believe that I am my age and I just now found a person who's helping me work through my childhood trauma. I'm like, I wish I had done this 15 years ago, but oh well, found her now. So here we are. And she's great. She's amazing. And so that's helped a lot so that when things hit me, I'm like, hey, that wasn't my fault. That was the thing's fault. And that's made me more resilient.
And, I'm not surprised that you're just now finding this person. I think it is really difficult to find a good trauma informed therapist. And that's because well, I can say from my clinical training,
Mhm.
we did not learn how to do that. We did
Okay.
not talk about the nervous system. That's something that you learn afterwards, and not everyone studies it or gets it. I learned
Okay.
person centered therapy, which is how to reflect back to you what
Mm.
you're sharing and how to be with you. And those
Mhm.
things are great, but they do
Mhm.
not treat trauma, not even close. And that was an important thing. And I would also say, just as an invitation, is that we often think, wow, what if I were to be able to get to this earlier? What would my life be like? But
Yeah,
sometimes we are not ready. We had
that's right.
other work that we had to do. And it's only when we've done that work that we become open to this other kind of work that is necessary for us to do. And
Do
so
you take
I know.
insurance? Do you take No, this all makes total sense. Like what I say, what if I had done this when I was 33? But when I was 33, I had two babies under the age of two. I mean, you try to get me to go to therapy, I would have said, I'm so sorry. Are you going to feed them? I'm like, there was no way, and then you're right. You're right. I don't think I was ready. I think I'm ready now.
And I know that it's going to make this incredible life that you already have,
Mhm.
this life that has so many gifts that you give to other people, gifts that you give to me all the time,
Thank you.
even bigger. even brighter. And I'm so grateful that I've gotten to see how that light shines and that I'm going to get to see it shine even brighter. So I'm very excited about where this is going to take you. And I'm going to ask you one last question, and that is, where can we find you?
Oh, well, my website is my first and last name.com, keypry.com. That's easy. And I'm on Instagram at krgpryal.com, which is I have 4 names, Katie Rose Guest Pryal. So KRG on Instagram. And that's actually where I am everywhere. That's the handle I use for everything. So Twitter, which I occasionally am on. I used to be on there all the time, and then it got weird. But I'm kind of going back. I miss my friends there. And on Blue Sky, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever. And it's also, that's my Substack. That's the most important thing. So my Substack newsletter is also krgpryal.substack.com. Yeah.
2 things. This will all be in the
Mhm.
show notes. So if there was anything that you didn't pick up, you will be able to find her using the information in the show notes. And also sign up for her Substack because she shares just incredible stories of her life that are so honest, so clear, and so filled with the great strategies that you have learned. And I connect on a heart level with every single one of them. And then I also learn something new every time, and I share them on my newsletter, right? So it's this great synergy because I love when I am reading someone that I resonate with and that I learn from. So sign up for her Substack. You will not regret it in the least. And I will say this, just on top of all of the great things that you share, you have a very strong writing voice. And so if anyone wants to learn about how to have a strong, authentic writing voice, they just need to read your Substack.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. It is a joy and a pleasure to spend time with you.
This has been a blast, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Hey, writers, have you started a memoir only to get lost in a sea of endless stories that seem to go nowhere? Are you wading through the messy middle of the revision process and searching for your narrative arc? Have you received vague feedback from agents or publishers or been explicitly told your book contains a lot of interesting and well written stories that follow in and then format? The solution to all 3 problems is the same: find your memoir's beats. But for most writers, it isn't as simple as buying a copy of Blake Schneider's book, Save the Cat, and following his formula. In fact, many memoirists find certain beats confusing, and some wonder if this contrived Hollywood formula will work for their book. That's why I'm teaming up with Jane Friedman to teach Create Your Memoirs Beat Sheet on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. During this 90-minute webinar, you'll learn how to capitalize on the benefits of a beat sheet, scrap the parts that might not serve your story, discover how a beat sheet can be used even with a nonlinear memoir, and gain confidence as you shape your material into a compelling book. Best of all, this webinar is just $25. You heard me, $25. That includes the webinar, a PDF of my slides, and a comprehensive workbook that will help you apply these principles to your story, no matter the structure you've chosen. So if you want to tame your material, find your narrative arc, and feel confident that the book you're querying is truly the story you wish to tell, go to janefriedman.com and click online classes. Or make it easy on yourself and click on the link in the show notes. That's it for today's episode. Before you leave, I would love your help spreading the word about this podcast. You can do this in a few very simple ways. Click on the subscribe button in the upper right-hand corner, then leave a 5-star review. You can also let me know what you think or share ideas for the podcast by connecting with me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or through my Writing Your Resilience newsletter, which you can have delivered directly to your inbox.